Okay, I'm going to give a little upfront warning about today's passage. Every now and then I need to talk about something hard, and that's going to happen today. Okay? So there's no question in my mind that not all of you are going to like what I have to say. Well, sorry about that. Pay attention to what we're talking about in the scriptures. Okay? So we're doing a series. We're focusing all summer on what does it mean to be human. And we're looking into, I use the metaphor of looking in God's eyes like a mirror. If you could look in God's eyes, Tozer says, his eyes would twinkle with delight as he looks at you because he loves you that much. And so as you look in his eyes, you begin to get a glimpse of who you are. So the way to answer the question, what does it mean to be human, is to actually take a look at who God is. And then we see who God is, and we begin to see who we are or who we're not. And so we're doing this all summer based on a Hebrew word called Hesed. It's a word that's translated typically loving kindness, okay? It doesn't mean anything to you other than that it's a fun word to say. So I've had you say it every Sunday. Hesed, say it. Yes, like agape, love. It'll become a familiar word. It's a very significant word throughout the Old Testament because it captures something about God's heart, something about his love for us, his commitment to us that is just breathtaking. No other God is like that, and we're going to see a little bit of that today, by the way. But I want to read to you 2 Chronicles 6:14, okay? This is in Solomon's prayer of dedication at the temple. Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven or on earth. Okay, pause. The very first question we have right out of the gate, do you believe that? There's no God like you. You know what this is? This is a dictionary of all the gods mentioned in the Bible. Okay? Right here. I wonder if we wrote one for today's world, the gods that we face today, how thick would it be? Okay? So this is an incredible work to go through and do all the background on all the gods mentioned. We're going to look at a few of them today, actually. So, Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven or on earth. You who keep covenant of love. There's that word chesed. God says that when he makes that commitment, that promise, he won't go back on it because he can't. He can't deny himself because he's God. Later on, Paul says in the New Testament, though we are faithless, he remains faithful. Okay? So every time we see this covenant love, this loving kindness, this imagery, it's always in the context of God's faithfulness to us. He will never go back on his promise. Never. And so he says, you keep your covenant of love with your servants who continue wholeheartedly in your way. So we learned something right here about what does it mean to be human. There is a cost to faithfulness. It's not free. There's a cost. And Solomon paid it. But before we talk about Solomon, think about where we've come in this story, this wonderful story of the Hebrew Scriptures. We have God displaying his love with Adam and Eve. After they disobeyed him and rebelled, he provided for them and took care of them. We have it with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He made the promise to Abraham, I'm going to bless the entire world through you. The entire world, all the nations through you. Wow, what a promise to receive. Okay? And then he repeats that to Isaac, and he repeats it to Jacob. He affirms it beyond that. We have the story of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery, and God protected him. Next thing you know, he's risen to the second level in Egypt when there's a worldwide famine. And his brothers come to him. Remember those great words? When they finally realize who he is? Because they sold him into slavery, his brothers. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Okay? The same event, and that's true of every event in Scripture. There's two sides to every event. On one side, you can focus on the tragedy of it, and on the other side, you can focus on what God is doing with it. I mentioned a couple weeks ago about my esophagus. Well, I found out in the last 2 weeks that this is most likely, because you guys that have been with me for 11 years, I've had one medical issue after another, haven't I? You guys have walked with me on that road. Well, I found out it's probably related to a chemical that they had us use in the Navy. The VA reached out to me. Okay? So I'm talking to all my doctors about this, and several of the people that went through the Navy in my period of time are actually near death because of that. And it's like, okay. And the doctors are puzzled by why I'm not crying or angry or upset. And I said, well, the reality is, my theology is very simple. I'm immortal till God says otherwise. So my urologist, he pointed out, he says, God's been with you every step of the way. We found your bladder cancer by looking at another problem. We found this by looking at another problem. Every step of the way, there are peers that aren't so fortunate. Okay? Does God watch out for us? Does he protect us? Oh, I could get angry. That's easy to do. That's human. It's not redeemed human, but it's human. I could get angry at God. I mean, I've puzzled along the years why, 6 kids in my family, we have medical issues, but nothing like what I have. Why did I draw the short straw? Why me? Right? And now I'm beginning to find out. Okay, so God has a plan. I've been exposed to so many medical professionals through all of this, and I get a chance to talk to them about the Lord. Okay, perfect. Joseph, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. That's love. Out of Egypt, we looked at that earlier this year when we were through the book of Exodus. He brought them out of slavery into freedom. And every step of the way, he's showing them this loving kindness. Every step of the way. Moses is another one. We looked at Exodus 34 after they built the golden calf, the golden bull. Remember, Moses, God says to him, I am Yahweh, I am God. And I show this Hesed to thousands of generations. And so then he says, I'm not going to go up with you. You guys go up to the promised land without me. And Moses says, please don't go. Please don't leave us. Please go with us. How will the nations know that you're our God if you're not with us? So Moses says those words that we talked about last week. Okay? I am pleased with you, Moses, and I know you by name. Aren't those good words? So Moses said, would you show me your glory? And God stuns him. He said, I will show you my goodness. That's worth more to us. Then you have David. We talked about David for a couple of Sundays. How God showed his love. And now we have Solomon. And Solomon's very interesting because he starts off very well and he ends very poorly. What we learned from Solomon, that wisdom is not enough. Wisdom has to be brought together with faith for it to become something. Because he pretty much violated all the commands in the Torah related to a king. All of them. So in 1 Kings 8, we have his dedication to the temple, which is a parallel to 2 Chronicles 6. Okay, parallel prayer. But then, by the time we get to chapter 11, we discover something about Solomon, a weakness. And I'm not going to be up on the thing. I'm just going to read you some snippets out of this. I want you to think about where he went. It's very pertinent to us today. King Solomon, however, it's only 3 chapters ago that everybody's bowing down and worshiping the Lord. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women. Okay? When I was a boy, I heard this preached on how women are dangerous. Now I look at it, I think, how ridiculous can you get? I remember studying Philo. Philo said the weakness of men is women. And it's like, you realize how weak it makes me look if I blame my sin on my wife? Really? I mean, she's hard enough to handle as it is, don't get me wrong. The problem wasn't that the women were the issue. The problem was Solomon was weak. And so they led him astray. As he grew older, verse 4, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord as God as the heart of David, his father, had been. He followed Ashtoreth. He followed Molech. He followed Chemosh. He followed and he made sacrifices to all these gods. And here's what God said to him. I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you, Solomon, and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David, your father, David had a lot of sin, but his heart would remain true. Every time he was confronted, he said, I have sinned. Every time. Solomon, when you look through, didn't do that. For the sake of David, your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David, my servant. Because David was the one who remained faithful. So God showed that love to Solomon, and Solomon betrayed him because of that. So here are the list of rivals. These are the main rivals. There are thousands and thousands of gods. But here's the main ones that are talked about. In Egypt, Horus, Amun, Isis, Serapis, Osiris. The Book of the Dead talks about 500 other gods. Canaan, you have Baal, Ashtoreth, Asherah, Molech. Philistines, you have Dagon, Chemosh, Milcom, Nergal. The list goes on and on and on. I want to say a word about Molech because that one is especially relevant to what I want to argue here. Molech was a very horrible, horrible god. He demanded children as a sacrifice. Solomon sacrificed children. Okay? We now, through archaeology, have identified so many cemeteries of children who were executed, who were offered to the gods as burnt offerings while they were alive. Okay? One of the traditions talks about Hinnom, or the valley of outside of Jerusalem, which we get the metaphor for hell. One of the traditions, one of the stories is that they had the drums beating continuously to cover up the sound of the children screaming as they burned them. And you have this language all throughout the Bible. They passed their children through the fire. Okay? And Solomon, he deteriorated so much in his faith that he was participating in that. Set up an idol to Moloch right there outside of Jerusalem. Okay? All right. I haven't talked to you much about abortion, but I'm going to today. So, bear with me. Let me be a pastor for a little bit. I'm not going to pretend that everyone in here has the same view on abortion because I know you don't. I know you don't. After Roe versus Wade was struck down, okay, the elders, we talked about, should we have a policy on abortion? And here's my take on policies. We can never think of all the reasons why we shouldn't do something. Okay, my wife, first wife, in the hospital, terminally ill, after our firstborn had died. And she was now on the strong slide down to death, no turning it around. And she wanted to experience marital pleasure one more time. So we used 3 forms of birth control, and she got pregnant. I know exactly where my daughter was conceived. And the doctors tried every day to get her to abort. They pleaded with her every day, please, please. She made the decision not to, so I exchanged a wife for a daughter. I honestly don't know what I would have done if it was my decision. I'm just being honest with you. All the grand platitudes about theology in the world, when it comes down to your wife, I don't know what I would have done. But what I do know is God despises the relentless sacrifice of children under the guise of rights. That's what I do know. And we have several other examples in our own church, which I ran by the elders. And I said, can we possibly think of a policy that would take into account every exception? The answer is no. So why don't we do the opposite? Why don't we say, Thomas is running around here. We love children. Now, I know that some of you, I know firsthand, and some of you I don't know. I know that some of you have gotten an abortion. This is not meant to guilt you, okay? Enjoy the forgiveness and grace that comes from the Lord. don't wrestle with the guilt of it. And if you're wrestling with the guilt, don't stay there. Come talk to me, okay? You don't have to carry that burden. Guilt is not something that the Lord does. That's not a leadership style that he employs in the Bible, okay? That's a theological idea that you are guilty until the cross. But don't bear the burden of guilt if that's you. It's fine. It's okay. Every one of us has sinned. By the way, in Solomon's prayer, I love his prayer because he says in the prayer a little bit later on, and when your people sin, because there is no human who doesn't. Just relax. Every one of you. Okay? How many times have I told you, I don't personally care what sin you're struggling with, except as a pastor to know how to heal and bring life. Jesus said in Luke 6, do not judge, do not condemn. You're never going to get that from me, ever. I don't care what you've done. You may get laughter because you really messed up your life. Okay? I may chuckle and go, oh boy, you got yourself in trouble, don't you? But don't stay stuck. Do I believe abortion is wrong? Yes, I do. Do I believe it's wrong 100% of the time? No, I don't. I don't know where that line is in my own personal life. I had to wrestle with it personally. Some of you had. But I do know this. If you talk to each other, including husbands and wives, and you start looking at every scenario, you're going to find that you disagree. But I will tell you this. I am ashamed, and I use that word carefully, that we as Colorado have the most liberal abortion policy in the state. You can now get an abortion on the day of delivery in Colorado. That just crushes me. Because every prophet brought this up. This is one of the things they talked about was children. It's one of the things they talked about. And God judged all the nations throughout this period of time based on one of the factors was how they treated the children. That's why when they asked Jesus about faith in the kingdom, he grabbed a little child, stunned them. Because you see, in the first century, children were at the bottom of the social order. You know why? By the way, we don't have a single record that I'm aware of adopting a child. We have thousands of adoptions of adults. Because children, you don't know how they're going to turn out. And they could bring dishonor to your name. And so when Jesus grabbed the child, that took world history in a completely different direction. Unless you have the faith like this little child. This little child. And that becomes a backbone to what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where he turns culture on its head. Every dishonorable thing in culture now becomes a high point. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who are poor. Blessed are those who suffer. The list goes on and on and on. But we learn from Solomon and Molech that God just hates the relentless killing of children. And I would add to it in today's world, for the sake of rights. The truth is, you gave up your rights when you came to Christ. You became a citizen of heaven. I thought long time, lots of times, it's too bad I can't take all of your passports, burn them, and replace them with a heaven passport, citizen of heaven. So what does that mean? You can't use your rights? No, you can use your rights. Paul used them. We have great rights. Vote your conscience. Do all that. Just be very careful how you select what you're voting for. Base it on these principles that are in here. That's what you should base it on. Okay? Paul used his rights. You should use your rights when it furthers the gospel. So Paul got beat in prison when it was illegal and didn't say a word. And the next day they said, okay, you're free to go. And he goes, yeah, I don't think so. You just beat a Roman citizen. And the whole leadership of the town was terrified because the punishment for beating a Roman citizen without due process was death. Their souls were in his hand right then, their life. He used it for the sake of the gospel. So, all right. Do I care? I mean, I don't like it that I have these medical issues, but do I care? God uses it for good. No, it's not that important to me. I really am not worried. I believe I'm immortal till God says otherwise. And I'm going to use wherever God takes me through the medical community to talk to people about the Lord. One of the doctors asked me, why are you not so angry? I laughed and I go, I'm a Christian. And he goes, you are? What does that mean? And I said, what it means is I actually believe. I said, I've got 45 years of serving Christ. I have advanced degrees, 2 masters and a PhD. I've studied as much as I possibly can in 4.5 decades. And you know what? I love the Lord because I believe it. I believe what is in here and I'm not ashamed of it. And I believe that I'm immortal till he says otherwise. And then when he says otherwise, I get to enjoy eternity with all of my friends who are already there and who will follow me one day. And he said, gosh, I love the way you think. I said, you should try it. There's a lot of churches around the hospital here. Go find one. So I wanted to highlight Molech because this is a big controversial area right now. It's a controversial area in our country, and it's very big in our politics. And I'm not telling you how to vote. I'll never do that. And there's a lot of factors to consider when you decide who to vote for. This is just one. For some people, this is the factor. For others, it's economics. For others, it's immigration. The list goes on and on. I'm not going to tell you how to order your priorities. All I'm saying is think carefully before you cast a vote. Look into the belief systems of the people. No one's perfect. I hate every president we've ever had. Okay? Because they're all knuckleheads. Just like me. I just praise Jesus. He didn't call me to be a lawyer. Sorry, John. Or a politician. But I'm grateful for the ones sitting out here that run for politics. I pray for them. I love them. I'm so grateful that they want to make a difference in their world. He hasn't asked me to do that. So when you think about this, I want to talk about one more ministry that we support. It used to be called Women's Resource Center. They changed the name because of some legalities and some state laws and all that. It's now called Sanctity of Life. Tim Sealing, who's in our church, he's homesick today, is actually the chairman of the board for this ministry. They're looking for a new executive director. You can pray for them. Their annual fundraising dinner is September 16th. If this is important to you, I would encourage you to go to their website, Sanctity of Life Center, and learn about them. It's a great little ministry right here. It's right here in our own backyard. And it's one of the ministries that we're involved in. So, all these gods. So when Solomon prayed at the beginning of the prayer, Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you on the earth. That is true. We don't have any correspondence anywhere at all talking about the gods the way our people talk about our God, with this concept of Hesed, this incredible love. We don't have anywhere in the world. We haven't discovered anything in archaeology where their gods are talked about, because the goal was to appease the gods. They weren't trying to learn from them. They just wanted them to be out of their mess. Just appease the gods. And so the sacrifice of children was very prominent during this time in world history. So, is it true? Yes, it is true. So, just before this, in chapter 5, verse 13, here's what the people shouted out. He is good. They're talking about the Lord. They're singing this. He is good. His chesed, his love endures forever. That's true. He's the only God. We are the only religion that teaches this. His love endures forever. And then after he prays, when God's glory filled the temple, okay, he says the people, they fall down and they sing this again. He is good. His love endures forever. So Solomon's very last thing that he prays, remember the great love promised to David, your servant. And then he turned right around and went the wrong direction. What did it cost him? It cost him his life. It cost him his kingdom. When he died, the kingdom split. Civil war. Terrible disaster. He did all the things that the Torah, the law, said not to do. He lost his legacy. He lost his kingdom. He lost his life. But God remembered his Hesed toward David. And so he preserved one tribe. That's the tribe from which the Messiah would come. So, let me ask you some questions. We'll close with this. What are the gods that you follow? Who do you follow? Remember, these people, when they moved, when Israel moved into the land, they were surrounded by thousands of gods. God showed them miracle after miracle to convince them that he was the real one. And for most of them, it didn't work. So what are the gods that you serve? Is it wealth? Recreation? Where do you find yourself on this? Health? I mean, I take care of myself, but I don't worry about it. If I die, I die. Skiing? Camping? Traveling? Social media, is that it? Sexual pleasure? Corporate success? That's what I said. I wonder how thick this book would be if we listed all the gods we have today. How thick would it be? Let me ask the question a different way. What are you willing to lose? Solomon lost it all. You willing to lose that? I've sat with many of you who are on the verge of divorce. I said, are you willing to lose? Is your anger at your wife worth losing your wife over? Are you willing to lose your family over an affair? What are you doing? What are you willing to lose? That'll begin to answer the question of where your heart really is. You see, this concept of Hesed is not free. There is a cost. But I guarantee you the cost is worth it. Because what do we know about sin? The further down that road you go, the less freedom you have. The person that takes the first drink, it's fun. Sin by definition is fun, or we wouldn't do it. Let's be honest. You take that first drink, second drink, third drink, fourth drink, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and pretty soon your options start to become limited as you become an abuser and maybe an alcoholic. Okay, as you move down, it becomes more and more destructive as time goes by. Drugs, okay, an affair, oh, it's fun. Let's be honest, it's fun. But pretty soon you find yourself entrapped. The only way to experience true freedom is by staying faithful, because all your options are open. Solomon learned that the hard way. What does it mean to be human? It means to be faithful. That's what it means. Because that's what you're created for, is to be faithful. That's when you are happiest, is when you are faithful. On the side of coin where tragedy occurs, on the other side is goodness. God really is good. What are you willing to lose? Father, thank you. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for, Lord, as we've looked all summer at this love. A love so deep, a love so committed, a love so foundational to who you are, that you pursue us to the end. Thank you for being that kind of God, a God that we care about greatly, and a God who loves us and cares about us even more. Help us, Lord, to stay faithful. We're grateful. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.